Welcome back to another episode of Digital Voices with Bo Tiffany. We talk about what's on our hearts, what's on our minds. We talk to interesting people. The goal is to tell a story. Everybody has a story, and it develops from the journey that we take through life. The lessons and insights and tools that it brings with us that help us tackle future endeavors is invaluable. And the goal of my show is to allow our listeners an insight to what made you, you, not only to connect with you, but also perhaps how to find inspiration through the journey that you went through individually. So with that said, my special guest today is Amber Crosson, and she has had a journey of her own. She wants to share some inspiration and some strength, especially to this trying time of the pandemic. So with that said, thank you for coming on Digital Voices, Amber. How are you today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing pretty good today. It's a little cold, but otherwise, it's not a bad day.
No, I was just going to say it's super cold outside. 19,
like 15?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cold enough to want to go back inside, not let the dog out.
Yeah, definitely.
So you had a desire to come on the show and talk about some things that you went through and hopefully provide inspiration and strength for people that are currently going through a hard time, and kind of shows that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and at the end of the day, this is all part of the journey, right?
Absolutely.
So where are you from? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was born in Missouri, Texas, but I grew up in San Antonio, Texas from the time I was 4 until I was 21, and then I've kind of moved around since. But I grew up, a lot of people think Texas, horses and ranches and stuff, but I grew up in San Antonio, so I grew up, in the suburbs.
Sure. What are the suburbs like compared to what they're like around here?
I don't know. I feel like it's hard to judge that just because times have changed as well. Like, even just walking through my neighborhood now isn't the same as it was when I was a teenager, because not only has my perspective on things changed, how I see things in the neighborhood itself has also changed.
Well, they always say you can't go home, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right, yeah.
It's amazing how fast the world develops.
Oh, absolutely. It's like next to my high school, I went to William Howard Taft first before O'Connor, and me and some other kids would, skip classes and go out into the woods and stuff and smoke and, do our average teenager rebellious things. And you can't do that anymore because there's a whole huge neighborhood there of really nice houses and, another giant movie theater that has a bowling alley in it apparently, and just, all kinds of stuff. They're always building more and more.
Movie theaters and bowling alleys. It's 2021.
Yeah, and now we can't use any of them. They built it just in time.
You poor people. It's interesting. Each community offers a little different flavor to it. How was it down in Texas compared to being up here in the northward?
There wasn't nearly as much complaining about the cold, for one.
Well, you don't have as much down there, right?
Yeah, right. It actually snowed earlier this year, so I got pictures of, people's kids playing in the snow. And I just remember to the first time I saw flurries, and then they melted as soon as they touched the ground. I was like, oh my god! And, now I'm like, woohoo.
Well, I find that interesting because, being from Wisconsin, many of us didn't think there would be snow in Texas.
Right, yeah. There's usually not. Maybe North Texas, but not in San Antonio and Houston like there has been this year.
Geographically, where is that located?
So San Antonio is 4 hours pretty much north of Mexico. Like, if you go straight up the middle of Texas.
So you're like southwest Texas.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then Houston is, really closer to the Gulf of Mexico.
Sure. Yeah, so for you guys to be getting snow, is that a typical, usual thing, or is that... Okay.
Absolutely not.
So is there something to this climate change that we're seeing, or is it?
I definitely think so. I know people like to say, yeah, well, it's not getting any warmer, but that's why they stopped calling it global warming. It does not mean that, like, every winter is going to be warmer and warmer, just that, the way things normally are going to change and there's going to be bigger extremes.
Sure.
Which seems odd because so far this winter has been, pretty mild for Wisconsin, I feel.
Every year, I feel like the snow belt continues to move up, whether it's 100 feet or a couple miles. When I was a kid, we used to get a ton of snow. And
That's what I've heard, yeah.
It felt like living in Alaska compared to what we get these days. So
right, like I've barely been able to make a snowman this year.
Yeah, and many of my friends that are into snowmobiling have had to drive further and further and further just to get good trails. So, you came from Texas. What culturally is it like down there compared to Wisconsin? Was it a shock moving up here?
I think, honestly, it's more... I feel like it was more liberal and kind of more like Madison, most of the places where I was. Austin is really a whole lot like Madison.
College town?
Yeah, a college town. And, my mom was a college professor, and there's like 4 or 5 or maybe 20 by now colleges in San Antonio.
Let me ask, what'd your mom teach?
She is a history professor.
Okay. Now, what was that like growing up in a household where you have a parent that's a professor?
Well, it felt like half of my life she was doing homework to become a professor, and then the other half of my life she was grading homework. So there was always homework, and I was very anti-homework when I was in school.
Do you tend to be... I find you as a pretty creative person.
Thanks.
Do you think that runs in the family?
I do, yeah.
Tell us about Dad.
My dad's always worked a lot. He worked at Walmart and climbed his way up. I've learned a lot from him as far as, like, when I worked at the grocery chain I was at. I learned the one lesson that'll never leave me is, don't be a cashier, because you can't go anywhere else in the store or get up in any ladder if you're just a cashier. You'll always be stuck as, like, just a cashier. But he introduced me to a lot of the music that I love. He's always, wanted me to go for my dreams. And
what kind of music was your dad into, and what was maybe some of the first that he introduced you to?
Well, the first time I got to pick out my own CD, I was at Half Price Books, and I was like, Dad, there's so much here, and I don't know what to get, like, help me. And I believe it was between a Blue October CD and Alice in Chains. And awesome. I was like, Alice in Chains. It was Alice in Chains Facelift. And nice. I remember on the drive home, he put it in the CD player, and Man in the Box came on, and he was like, no, we have to skip that song because your younger siblings are in the car. And he's like, something about shit, and so.
Oh, okay.
But then I went upstairs and listened to the CD all the way through and sat there and read the words on the paper that comes in the CD and was like, remember going downstairs and being like, oh my God, thank you, that CD is amazing. And, to this day, it's still one of my favorites.
Am I hearing maybe some church in the background? What were your grandparents like?
Yeah, my grandparents on both sides were very church-oriented.
Okay, that starts to make sense.
Yeah, pretty, not Catholic, but just, average Christian, somewhere in there. So they had that upbringing.
Sure.
So growing up for me, like on my mom's side, it was a little more strict. I wasn't allowed to say that sucks in front of my granny because that was not good. Like, that was too far already. But then to my mom herself, I could say crap because that's not a bad word. But shit is a bad word.
Right.
And I always question that. But there's a whole Netflix little series on cuss words now, and I'll just leave it to them.
I feel like every generation gets a little bit more tolerant compared to the generation before.
Definitely.
Can you imagine, shifting angles on this if we didn't have these career politicians and these ideas change more frequently rather than holding on for 70 years.
How much progress we could have possibly made.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it sounds like you came from a great home, great family. What was your teenage years like?
My teenage years were filled with a lot of, the average, I would guess, teenage angst and rebellion. And I know I definitely had depression starting very early. And it wasn't something that was as talked about, especially openly, as it is these days. So my parents just really didn't know that much about it. I mean, it's not like I was exactly going to them with it. It was something I just thought I had to deal with on my own, and that's all it was. And, there was some, self-harm, scratching my arm and stuff like that. But, overall, my teenage years were pretty average. I had a good amount of friends, and we did, just average teenage stuff. There wasn't anything super wrong or abnormal.
So it's interesting because a lot of my guests, the first thing they'll say, and I apologize, I have my dog here. The first thing that my guests will say is, well, I was really interested in drama, or I was really interested in math, or I was really interested in this, like sports. The first thing that we talked about was some mental illness that started to happen or develop in your teenage years.
Yeah.
So
otherwise, choir singing was my thing.
Okay, awesome. But the importance for those years was dealing with this development of mental health and how it was affecting you, which may or may not have isolated you from really focusing as much on school. Was that a big hindrance to you at that time?
Oh, absolutely. I've heard a few other people say that they had, the same thought process as me on this, but I literally thought that I was not going to live past 18. I was either going to kill myself. I started smoking cigarettes because, they say it takes 7 minutes off of your life, and I was excited about that, so why not smoke all the cigarettes I want? Mm-hmm. Who cares about school? It's not going to matter if I'm, not going to live past 18. Why don't I just do...
Self-destruct.
Well...
Right. In a way, that's really what it is.
Kind of, but it was also a lot of just hedonism. Just living however I thought would make me happier, or doing whatever I wanted, even if it wasn't, the normal thing to do, which turns out, most of it was the normal thing to do. Mm-hmm. But, thinking of doing something different or whatever I want to do because, I got, 4 or 5 years to live. What fucking difference does it make?
Right.
So, yeah.
Where did that idea come from? 4 to 5 years.
I don't honestly know. I don't know what it was about the age of 18 that I thought was going to be...
Was it a movie you saw? Remember back in the day where we had...
It could have been, but it's
there
not...
was a series of movies like that, focused around death and time limits and...
Right.
Well,
it was like my best friend, he was saying he wanted to die when he was 27 because that's the age for, so many famous people have died at 27. But I never had that one. Mine was just 18, and I'm sure I probably picked it up from somewhere unknowingly.
Silly high school stuff.
Stupid high school thoughts. What did I know? I was like 16.
But at that age...
we know everything.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I knew I wasn't going to live past 18 because, I was a genius.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, prepping is a hell of a thing. And living in the moment is another...
Right, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with living in the moment, but you pretty much, one of the rules of life is that everything in, what's the word I'm looking for? Amounts, average amounts. If you overdo anything, even if it's good, it'll become too excessive, and then it's not good for you anymore.
Mm-hmm. You were going through this time, and doing whatever you wanted to do. tell me about it, because you started smoking pot at 14, and you're also drinking a lot, by the time that you were 16, and did hard drugs and needles by 18. So for most of us, these are pivotal years where there's a lot of growth. So what got you into that during those years? It sounded like you came from a great home.
Yeah, I mean, I came from, an average home. My parents worked a lot. My mom was doing her schoolwork, and I was the oldest. I had 2 younger siblings at the time. And, not that I lost either one of them. Now there's 3 of them.
But it sounds like they were busy. Were you feeling neglected?
Yeah, but I was taking advantage of it. I feel like I could get away with more because they weren't paying attention. So when
you weren't being held accountable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I just kind of ran with it too. I mean, I never really complained about being neglected when I was younger because
you're the true rebel without a cause.
I guess I was.
I have no reason, but I'm going to rebel. So fuck you.
Yeah, I'm just going to rebel just to rebel because fuck it, why not? So, yeah, I remember the first time I smoked pot. I don't feel like I actually got high, which I hear is pretty common.
Oh yeah.
And then for the next year or 2, I kind of smoked on and off. I would smoke, a few times a week for a few months, and I'd go a few months without it, and then I'd start smoking more until one day, probably at 15 or 16, it just kind of stuck, and then I was smoking pot every day. I never really felt like it got in the way of any. Yeah, honestly, anything can be addictive. People get addicted to sugar. I've had caffeine withdrawals. Not everything's a physical withdrawal. Sometimes it's emotional. It could be just an object, but if you feel like you don't have it, then you don't feel right.
But not everybody gets into hard drugs by the time basically you're still in high school, right?
No, I was out of high school because I dropped out of high school because I was so far behind from, all of my fun rebelling that when I was 17, I dropped out.
It was a domino circle the drain kind of thing that ended up with dropping out of high school.
Yeah.
How old were you?
I was 17 when I dropped out.
Okay.
I basically bullied my mom into signing the piece of paper allowing me to drop out of school at 17.
Gotcha. Just the rebel without a cause.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you finally got out of school. Did you leave home right away? Were you like, screw this?
So, I had already been spending a lot of my time at a guy's house right before I dropped out, and he had already dropped out. So then we were hanging out there, and then when that relationship ended, I was pretty much just I wasn't working yet. I was still living at home. I was 17.
If I can pry a little bit.
Oh, that's fine. He was a pathological liar, and I caught him texting some other girl, stupid teenage stuff.
Sure. Trying to be a player.
Yeah, trying to be a player. He wasn't very good.
Guys aren't very smart. Let me give you a little insight here.
Okay.
So guys are who, what, where, when, why. It was me and Bob. We went to the bar. He said this. I hit him. They kicked us out. The end. Girls are like, well, I was on my period. It was really emotional. And then he said this, and this girl had said this to me earlier, which really pissed me off. And I just, there's 50 more layers to a girl's thought process than there is for a guy's process. Most people don't know that.
There's a whole TED talk on how differently our brains are wired.
Oh, yeah. Big time. And I think part of it is that instinctual, reproductive, genetic component that's built into us. Because sometimes I hate you girls, and I'm sure you feel the same way about us guys.
You guys are dicks like half the time, at least. Like, who the fuck needs you?
We don't know how to please you. We try, but we don't know how to please you because your needs change so often. And I think, for guys, we're fairly consistent. Girls, there's a curve that you go through every month that changes hormonally, and your needs change as a result. So,
all right, so to go back, I'm 17, I'm out of school, but almost all of my friends are still in school.
Okay.
So I'm waiting for summer, or there was a few older kids I could hang out with who were out of school.
Did you become as popular because now you have your own place and people could...
No, I didn't
Okay.
work that way.
Okay.
That would have been the cool, rebellious thing to do. I didn't exactly take that path. That would have required responsibility and forward thinking, which I was still not doing yet.
Sure.
That doesn't come until, a few years ago. Yeah. No, I was just going to the parties that other people were throwing. So I was waiting for school to get out, and it was like the last day of school, and my mom comes to my room, and she's on the phone with my step-grandfather, Larry, and my grandmother, her mom, had just gotten in this horrible accident. Her blood sugar got too low, she was driving by herself, she lost control of the truck, she flipped it. Larry wants to know if I can, within an hour's notice, get on a plane and fly to Indiana.
Oh, my.
And I had never flown before. I was really excited for summer to start and to be able to hang out with my friends.
Right.
But, the day before that could happen, I said yes to go help out my grandmother. And for my first flight ever, got shipped up to Indiana. Had some older guy that I didn't fucking know, had never met. One of Larry's coworkers picked me up from this tiny airport. I don't even know where it was. But it was the smallest airport I've ever seen. And I was on a little plane, too, that second one. And then he took me to Dairy Queen, and then he took me to my grandparents' house, and then I was there for the next 2 months, and that was, the first, real, or really any kind of tragedy that I had personally faced was within that 2 months, and immediately after getting back to Texas from there. And I think a lot of that culminated in kind of, with all of my mental health history before that, and then having...
Was this a family decision to go to Grandma's, or was this your decision with your grandma?
It was, my mom came to my room. I think my dad was already at work. My siblings were at school. And of course I had dropped out, so I was already out of school. I want to say she must have already had Emily at the time as well, which is my youngest sister. Because I was 17 when she was born. Okay. So she came into my room. We were the only ones home. And she was like, hey, I got a question for you. I was like, okay. She's like, would you be willing to fly to Indiana to help Larry out with your grandmother? Because, yesterday she got in that really bad accident. Now she's at home in a back brace. And I was like, when? And she was like, you'd have to pack right now, and I can get you to the airport and on a plane within an hour. I was like, yeah, I guess. I'm the oldest grandchild on that side, so there wasn't really anyone else who could leave and go help.
Right.
So, it was the right thing to do, and I felt kind of obligated, and I love my grandmother, so... No,
that's what families should do.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I went up, and I was taking care of her, and, So the first hospital she had been life-flighted to after the accident sent her home in a back brace because they did an x-ray but didn't do an MRI. So 2 weeks of me being at the house helping her on and off the couch, in and out of bed, in and out of the tub, on and off the toilet, everything. After 2 weeks she wasn't getting any better, so we decided to take her back to the hospital that was in town.
What was going on? Was it a mobility thing? Was it a cognitive thing?
Well, what happened was, the meds were making her a little loopy, too, so she kept thinking that I was my aunt or I was my mom. Sure.
So there was a component of dementia that was from the medication, or the medication was treating?
No, from the medication. Before the accident, she was all there.
Okay.
And I'm going to spoil this story by saying she made a full recovery.
Okay.
She could walk again. We went water rafting on the Colorado River after all of this, some years after. But
sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's amazing, and also a good memory. So.
Yeah, definitely. But so we took her to the hospital, and she had a seizure in the elevator. They, got her stable. They gave her an MRI. It turns out that her spine was broken, pinching her spinal cords that entire 2 weeks that she was in a back brace, and I was taking care of her. Mm-hmm. So it's really, a miracle that she wasn't paralyzed at least from the waist down, because it was broken like this and pinching them, and if it had just pinched them the right way, she would have been paralyzed.
Sure.
So then she needed spinal surgery. So then she had to get taken down to Louisville, Kentucky, where they had a better hospital for spinal surgery there. So we took her there, and she had spinal surgery, but while she was still in that first hospital, it was just me and Larry alone at the house. And this man has been married to my grandmother since before I was born. It was their anniversary. He chose the night before their anniversary to molest me, and then I walked outside and was just, calling my friends, what the fuck?
Right.
This stuff doesn't happen to me.
Tell us that story. Because he really glimpsed over that. So he molested you, your friends showed the end.
Right.
What happened?
So what happened was, it was just me and him at the house, and I never really thought anything creepy of him. He was, my grandfather my whole life.
How old is he?
At the time he was 55 and I was 17.
Okay.
And there wasn't really much to do in that town. I didn't really know anyone. I had made one friend, but that was it. And so I was just walking around the town just to get out of the house. I mean, it's a small little, sleepy town or whatever in South Indiana. So I was just walking around. I remember seeing a baseball game going on. I kind of watched that for a minute, and then I walked back to the house. And he had told me to let him know when I got back home, because he was going to go to bed. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, sure. So I'm just walking around the town, talking to my friends on my mom's old Motorola Razr phone that she let me take to Indiana with me. And so I get back to the house. I'm like, hey, let me call you right back. I'm going to go let Larry know that I'm home. Well, I used to call him Gramps. So I go in there. I'm like, hey, Gramps, I'm home. And he was like, okay, cool. Come lay down for a minute. And I was like, okay. I've laid in the bed with him before. He's my grandfather. Didn't really think anything of it. And then I'm laying there, and then he reaches over and puts his hand on my breast and kisses me on the mouth and asked me if I liked it. And I just froze for what felt like forever, but it was probably 20 seconds. And said, I have to go to the bathroom. And got out of the bed and ran outside and called my best friend. And I was freaking out. I was like, what am I gonna do? I'm stuck here alone with him. He's married to my grandmother. Was he like this with my mom or my aunt? Now I just have so many more questions. I know a lot of the other adults in my family don't really care for him, and I know he's kind of brash, but I had always loved him up until that point. And
sure.
So I was like, well,
he
now I just have
treated
more.
You differently because he liked you.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, that could have been it, too. So then the next day was their anniversary, and we went to visit my grandmother in the hospital, and I was just really not talking a lot. And I remember, I couldn't stand to be in there. He brought her flowers and stuff, and she was laying kind of weak in this bed, and I was like, I'm gonna go
acting
outside.
Like nothing ever happened.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he's acting like everything's fine, and I'm just like, what the fuck? So I go outside, and I call my mom on her cell phone, and I remember asking her, so I know that, not everybody really likes Larry, and, it probably sent a signal to my mom that all of a sudden I'm calling him Larry. I'm not calling him Gramps anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was like, but have you ever had a real reason to hate Larry? And she's like, why? What are you talking about? What happened? And I was like, I can't right now. Let me call you tonight, later, something, I can't do this right now. And she was like, just tell me. And I was like, I can't. I literally can't do that right now. I'll call you back. So then we leave the hospital. We go to a CVS. And inside the CVS, there's one aisle that's basically a liquor store. And I'm just like following Larry a couple feet behind through the store or whatever, completely unamused. And he was like, "Do you want anything?" And I'm like, kind of getting pissed. Like, really? So I was like, "Yeah, fuck it. Give me that bottle of Jack Daniels." And he was like, "How about we get you, like, the smaller one?" And I was like, because I pointed at, of course, the, gallon-size bottle of Jack Daniels.
Right.
He gets me the normal-size bottle of Jack Daniels. I was like, yeah, fine, whatever. So then I went I went back to his house. My grandmother was still in the hospital. He went to bed. I stayed outside. I pretty much spent most of my time after that point hanging out on the roof of the house or in the driveway or walking around the town somewhere.
So you weren't comfortable, obviously, being at home?
No. But, I was a genius at 17 years old. So,
and you didn't have anybody really to help you?
No, I was there completely alone. So I had this bottle of Jack Daniels, and I knew I had to tell my mom that night, and I didn't know how to tell her or what to say or, So I figured I'd throw in some liquid courage and drink, way too much Jack Daniels so that way I could tell her.
Why didn't you go to the police?
I didn't know what to do. I could have, but then what happens to me? Are the police going to ship me back down to Texas? What happens to my grandmother? Do I stay there to take care of her? What if the charges don't stick? Then I'm stuck in another state with no one around. My grandmother's in the hospital about to be recovering from the spinal surgery she's about to have.
Sure.
Like,
you felt obligated to stay.
Yeah,
and you
I
were
did.
just trying to do the best that you could.
Right.
What ended up happening?
So he was pretty much trying to buy me off. Trying to buy my silence the whole rest of the time that I was up there. And on our way...
How long did this go for?
I ended up being up there for a total of about 2 months.
Okay.
And that was like week 3 that happened.
Okay. So like 5 weeks of this pampering, whatever you want. What was he doing in the meantime?
Well, he justified his he gave me his reasons. Oh, I'm a caregiver with no love because your grandmother's older, so I guess, because my granny wasn't putting out, it made him feel like he was justified in doing whatever he wanted to me. But he obviously wasn't justified enough to not try and buy my silence. So, we were on our way to Kentucky.
All right, wait.
Okay.
So, this happened once. He now buys you and gives you whatever you want, and you let this continue? And he pretty much does whatever he wants? Is that what I just heard?
No. I didn't allow that to happen anymore. Like,
okay.
That wasn't what was going on. It was just that I was going to take advantage of him buying me anything I wanted.
Okay.
Because in his mind, it was him trying to buy my silence so I don't tell my mom, right? Or anyone else. I already told my mom.
What was the stuff that he was buying you?
He bought me shoes because I needed shoes. Mine were falling apart.
Some materialistic things.
Yeah, materialistic shit. But the other big thing...
Wait, you told your mom...
I had told my mom.
What did she say? I'm sorry, you told her the night it happened?
The next night.
Okay.
Because the next day after that happened was their anniversary. Then I was at the hospital. Then he bought me the alcohol. Then I got drunk and fucked up and told my mom.
Okay.
And then blacked out.
So you called her while you were fucked up?
Right, like...
And then you blacked out?
Right.
And then what happened?
Then I guess I was on the phone with a guy named Chris, and Larry picked me up and took me inside. He said that I told him I was going to throw up, and I was cussing him out in the bathroom. But all I really know is that I woke up in the bed in the room I was staying in and was not wearing pants.
Did you go to the cops then?
like I said, I was a genius. Of course not. I just was still lost, so...
So what happens after this?
So I got him to bring the guy, Chris, that I had been talking to up there. So Chris hopped on a Greyhound and came up to Indiana so that way I wasn't at the house alone with Larry. Because I needed, like, a buffer or something.
Did that work?
It worked for while I was there, yes.
Okay.
Larry couldn't touch me anymore. Chris knew what happened. I was like, look, don't kill him. Because I don't know what we'll do with my grandmother if he's not there to take care of her, but I don't know what to do. Like, I just had no idea what to do. It was just me trying to struggle through it and finally get back fucking home. Not, like, kill my grandmother with the news. I mean, it's something... That aspect of this whole situation of should my grandmother know? Should no one tell her? Everyone decided. I don't feel like... Ultimately, I did make a choice because I didn't say anything to her. But I felt like everyone else decided that it would be best for her to not know. And I just kind of went along with it.
I understand.
So Chris was there for the last couple of months. Or last, like, month and a half. So that did help. I had a buffer. You know, Larry couldn't do anything to me. I had someone to have my back. And Chris seemed like a really good guy while we were up there. Looking back on it now, what the hell was he gonna do if I told him to fuck off? He didn't have any money or anyone to help him. Like, he would have been stranded in Indiana. So, of course, he was on his best behavior while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
So the nightmare finally ends, and my grandmother's healthy enough where she can be at home on her own while he's at work.
How are you dealing with this mentally?
Not well. Just having sex and drinking and smoking. But
you were looking for something.
Well, I mean, even before that, I was gonna do whatever the hell I wanted. You know, the whole rebellion, I'm not supposed to be having sex, and if I want to, and I'm depressed, and maybe that'll cheer me up, or, you know, whatever stupid thought I had as a teenager.
Sure.
But, so I really wasn't dealing with it at all. I was doing nothing productive for my mental health, for dealing with this, you know, traumatic experience that I had just experienced.
So you start to spiral.
Yeah, so I started spiraling. And then, being with Crazy Chris really, I call him Crazy Chris. I won't use his last name, but we'll just call him Crazy Chris.
No, that's fine. No last names, please.
Yeah, no. So, as soon as the plane landed in San Antonio, what I thought was like a huge sigh of relief.
You're coming home.
I'm finally not in Indiana. I don't have to see Larry. Like,
right.
I can, you know, try to process what's happened and breathe now. That is not what happened. Chris started crying before we even got out of our seats on the plane, and I asked him what was wrong, because I was very confused, because I was so happy.
Right.
And he was like, I just know everything's going to go downhill from here. And Jesus Christ, if I had known what he meant by that at the time, I would have left him on the plane. But I learned.
Well, what do you think he meant by that on the plane?
He knew how unstable he was and how he was going to get, which is very unstable. Very threatening of committing suicide if I leave him. Very abusive physically and mentally. I mean, my parents called the cops on him once. He choked me until I passed out once in my driveway. He threw shit at me. He threw me across a room on my birthday. Must have been when I turned 18. So just the next 9 months was how long that lasted, where I didn't have any space to breathe or try and deal with the traumatic experience I had just gone through.
Right.
I was now enduring another one.
Right.
So I finally got out of that.
What were the impacts of going through that for you?
I do feel like
just at that moment after you got out of the Chris situation?
I felt like I was just so happy to be out of it. Like, it took 3 months of me not texting back and not answering a phone call for me to finally stop getting like 50 text messages a day and 30 missed calls. And so after those 3 months, it felt like I could actually finally breathe again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I can be a fucking human being again. Like, I'm not just this battered woman being thrown around and having to deal with everybody else's shit. Like, I was working full time. It was my first job.
Independence became really important to you.
Right. So I was really excited to have that. And then, I could go and drink and party, but it wasn't like I was getting so fucked up that I couldn't maintain my own independence.
Mm-hmm.
I was living at my parents' at the time, and just going to work and hanging out with my friends, and everything was good for a while. And then I went to a party, and I met this really cute guy. And we spent some time together, and then we started dating. And then not too long after, it started getting a little more serious. And that's when he told me, hey, just so you know, I have had some issues with drugs, and it's not really bad right now, but I'm still working on it. And I really liked him, and I believed in him. I knew he was a really good guy, and he was hot, and he was a drummer in a band, and I was enamored, so I do feel like we did originally have a lot of love for each other. I would even say I still have love for him now, even, after everything. I just want to see him, be good and do good in life. But I didn't fully grasp what he meant when he, was telling me that he had some drug problems. Because, I had been drinking and smoking and shit, since I was younger. And I was like, okay, yeah, it's a little more than I'm used to, but I'm sure we can work it out. And one of his friends had bet him that he would start drinking more before I would stop drinking so much. And then I pretty much stopped drinking. It was like, once every now and then on Fridays or something.
Sure.
For a good couple of months, and I saved up $1,000 from work, and pretty much...
Amazing how you have money when you're not spending it on shit.
I know. And then I moved in with him and his family. He lived with his mom, or his parents, and he had a younger sister. And the family took me in, like, with open arms. They were amazing, and I loved them. And
that's because you're special.
Yeah, thanks. So, I don't even know how long into the relationship. We probably had a good...
Well, you were 17 when you met, or 18 when you met?
I was 18 when I met him.
Okay. So within 6 months, that's fair, right?
Right.
4 to 6 months, the honeymoon was over.
Well, what ended the honeymoon abruptly was that we had gotten a dog and brought it to his parents' house. And I was like, it was this abandoned puppy, and I was like, it would have a really good home, with your parents and stuff. Can we try it out? So we surprised him, and I remember his sister crying because she missed their old dog so much, and it was just so sweet, and everyone fell in love with her right away.
Sure.
And so we took her in, and ultimately his parents kept her. She has a really good life. They spoiled the crap out of her, probably undid all of my training, but whatever. She has a good life. That's what matters. So
you gotta take the good with the bad, right?
Yeah, right. So, but okay, so I was playing with her one night, and her head knocked me in the mouth really hard. Because we were like, kind of horse playing around and stuff. And then I went to bed because I had to get up and go to work the next morning. And I got up the next morning to go to work, and it looked like there was a golf ball in my mouth. My fucking tooth abscessed. So I still went to work. I was there for like an hour. What had happened was I had had a root canal done on that tooth probably 3 years before this happened. But I never got to go back for the permanent filling. I only had the temporary filling. I was kind of still dependent when I was like 15, 16 for my parents to take me to the dentist.
Sure. So
and
just
I don't
missed.
know what happened, but I never could go back for the permanent filling. So, because of that, the infection came back, and when Chance, my dog, hit my mouth, it knocked some of that infection into my gums, and then it, blew up. So
you had kind of like a cyst that probably exploded.
Pretty much, yeah.
That entered into your healthier tissue.
Right. So, by the time I left work, it looked like there was a grapefruit in my cheek. It was huge. And I'm in the back of the dog grooming was my first job. I was in the back blow-drying dogs, crying because I was in so much pain, till finally one of my coworkers was like, grabbed me by the arm, took me over to my boss, and was like, look at her. Let her go. She needs to go to the hospital. And so I had my boyfriend at the time pick me up, and I was just in so much pain, and I didn't know if I still had insurance. I didn't know what to do. I was like, do I go to the hospital? Do I not? And I was just in so much pain, and he looks over at me, and he's like, so it's not going to solve the problem, but I have something that will help you with the pain for now. And I was like, anything. Whatever it takes.
Sure.
So we pulled over. I still remember what parking lot.
You're on your way to the hospital.
Well, I wasn't sure if I was going to go to the hospital or not. I was like, because I couldn't get a hold of my mom to tell me if I had insurance or not. And this is my first, emergency as being out of the house and stuff.
Right.
Which, isn't an excuse. Yeah, duh, I should have just gone to the hospital in the first place.
Sure.
But so we pulled over in a shopping center parking lot, and he did whatever he was doing, and he was like, all right, don't look and stick out your arm, and I did. And then I stopped crying. The pain didn't completely go away, but it was tolerable. Sure. So then we went back to his house. Both of his parents were RNs. So I just tried to go lay down and see if it would, kind of start to go down on its own.
If they're RNs, were they able to get you medication to combat the infection?
No. Once his mom saw me, she was like, I'm taking you to the hospital right now. Because what they had to do, because my mom never got back to me about the insurance or anything,
right? They
took me to, this hospital in San Antonio where you take people if they don't have insurance.
Gotcha.
So I sat there from 4 o'clock in the afternoon till midnight before I got put in a room, and then they put an IV in my arm with Dilaudid, and they slit the inside of my cheek and drained the pus out.
Sure.
So then the next morning, at 8 o'clock in the morning, my dad could take me downtown where they would pull the tooth out, and it was one of those things where they have, they're training the younger emergency dentist.
Right.
And so having him do it.
Dentist school.
Right. So this guy's ripping this tooth out that I had a root canal on 3 years ago, piece by piece. And I remember, I'm awake for the whole thing. I'm just sitting there with my mouth open. Mm-hmm. And the guy going, you have a cavity in the tooth right behind it. Do you want to wait and get a root canal, or should we just pull it now? And I was like, nope, pull it now. Just get rid of it. I don't want to go through this again.
Sure.
So, I've had 5 teeth pulled out. Mm-hmm. But they're all the ones right in front of my wisdom teeth. So then I just didn't have to get my wisdom teeth pulled. And they're kind of moving up. And my front crooked teeth are kind of straightening out and going back over time.
Isn't that funny?
At least it worked out for something, right?
Right.
But so, that was my first experience with any form of injection. They gave me...
Previous to that, what kind of drugs had you been doing? Just pot?
I had dabbled in... I had done coke twice in my life. And I knew that I liked it, and I never wanted to become addicted to it, which I didn't understand that much about addiction itself, but I knew that if I did it too often, like cigarettes, I would want to do it all the time, cigarettes, because I was already addicted to smoking. So I tried it. It was fun. I had fun with my friends, whatever. And then it didn't come up again. And I didn't bring it up again. It wasn't like anything I was going to go out and look for. I had tried, what is it, salvia, that other weird pot that makes, people act weird.
Yeah.
And they take videos of it.
I
didn't like it.
No,
No.
It fucked with my conscious part in a way I didn't like.
Yeah, same. I saw everything in time segments, like boxes, like a comic book.
Yeah.
So it only lasts like 30 seconds, but I was like, that was not an enjoyable 30 seconds.
No.
I'm good. So, I mean, yeah, I think besides, pot, drinking, Coke a couple times, I had taken a few pain meds that were going to be thrown away from when I was at my grandmother's and I was dealing with all of that. They kept giving her stronger and stronger and stronger medication.
Mm-hmm.
So then I would take a couple out of a bottle before Larry threw it away or whatever. But outside of that, like, I had never done a drug that the next day I was like, I need that drug again.
Right.
Until this point. So, I got out of the hospital, I remember spitting blood on the road. My dad's white truck, trying not to get blood all over his truck. And I had just saved up that $1,000. So I was like, hey, let's go get more of that.
Mm-hmm.
And after like 5 days in a row of that, I remember him saying, I don't think we should. That's not a good idea. And I had no idea why I was throwing a fit. But I was just throwing a little fucking tantrum, like hissy fit, until I, threw a fit enough where we went and got more. And then that was just the way it became until it got to the point where we got kicked out of his parents' house. And now we're living in a truck. And now I'm stealing from people's yards. I'm taking bikes. I'm stealing from Walmart. I'm, just doing all the junky moves. Stealing shit from my family, from the house. It really snowballed really fast.
Then it kind of became something more when you guys were living in the truck. Tactics, things that your creativeness, that I'm not sure if that is the way it is amongst all transients or just unique ones that are really smart. Tell us about some of those, because you've told me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not proud moments, but...
No, it's okay, but I think it's
this is what
people aware.
Right, yeah. So, we had the truck to use, which was definitely in our advantage. And before we got completely kicked out of the house, before we started panhandling, what made us think to start panhandling was we were legitimately out of gas in the truck, and we had our dog, Chance. And we're sitting there trying to figure out what to do, and then a couple people came by and asked us if we were all right, and we told them what was up, and they handed us money. And we were like, light bulb.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I was like, ding, okay. So then we started doing that, and then after a while, you gotta get creative with doing that, and it was things like, I got really good at pushing that Chevy around because I would put it in neutral right in time and shut the engine off, so it would be like I ran out of gas, and then I'd push it the rest of the way. And then, guys would come from all around to help me push the truck into the gas pump. And then I do the, shit, I don't have my wallet. I'm looking around the truck for my imaginary money.
And you're a pretty girl, which is what me and them, half of them jump in to try to help you in the first place.
It definitely didn't hurt. Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes people would just
fill
up the
my
truck.
Number and $50.
Yeah, right. So sometimes people would just actually put gas in the truck. I learned that if you have a gas can and you ask people, like because there's a lot of panhandling in San Antonio. So if you just walk up to people and ask for money, they're like, yeah, I've heard that before, whatever. So yeah, you kind of got to start being a little more clever, find different tactics. So one of which was to walk around with the gas can and start with, I don't want your money. I'm not asking for money. I really just need some gas. I have a gas can. people are way more inclined to give you money if you start with, like, I'm not asking for money, but gas can. Gas? Maybe? Yeah? And sometimes you just get gas, but we always fucking needed gas. So, either way.
Yeah, it was a win-win. Let me ask you, so there's a certain thrill, if you will, that comes along with the thrill of
getting away with something.
Right. Did this kind of become an addictive thing for you?
Yeah, sorry, just thinking back. I mean, I used to have some weird sense of pride, I think, about how good I got at stealing groceries from Walmart. Because, and I've talked to one of the Walmart theft guys, whatever they're called, preventative, whatever.
Preventative security.
Security, yeah, thank you. So, and I've talked to a couple people about it, and it's, you know, they're not really watching the cameras in the grocery department. They're looking for, you know, electronics and stuff like that. And so...
high-priced items.
Right. So, I just, on a pretty regular basis, would go into Walmart and just get some food. And that was pretty much how we ate. I mean, the only other way we had, like, a good amount of food always coming was... This one was his idea. We pulled up to a McDonald's, and I was like, why are we here? They're closed. And they were unloading stuff, and it was during the Monopoly little game time.
Sure.
So he's like, just get in the driver's seat and get ready to go. And I was like, okay? You steal shit from a McDonald's? Like, what's going on here?
Right.
Well, he went and he stole a box of French fry sleeves. So they all have those little tickets on it. So we peeled all those little tickets and just so many free, you know, McDouble, free smoothie, small or whatever, free breakfast sandwich. So for months we lived off of frickin' McDonald's because we had these little coupons and we just go through different drive-thrus. So, you know, I laugh at it looking back now.
Those are all skills. The things that we go through, the tribulations that we go through, we have to be creative. And when we do that, we pick up certain skills.
Right.
Those are the skills that we're identifying right now. And we'll look at how those have helped you after you were out of that situation.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Yeah. So you're going through this stuff. How did you get out of the truck? How long did this last, and how long were you panhandling / grifting?
So from probably 19 to 21, so a good 3 years. I was, at one point in time, I had my own room at an apartment when we had split up because we were kind of on and off. You know, it's hard to maintain a relationship when you're both living in a truck.
Right.
And both using, and I just kind of started to feel like most of the pressure of making sure we weren't sick every day, which we started out sick every day, was on me. So then when I felt like it was just me, I was able to work a job and sustain, like, paying rent and having a job, even though I was still screwing up. And then... that was when it was just heroin. When cocaine got involved, that's when, you know, everything kind of spiraled even on my own. So for 3 years, it was either living in the truck, I was a live-in nanny for a while, I had an apartment with some friends for a while where I had my own room and paid rent, I lived with a coke dealer for a while and place to place.
Survival tactics.
It was all survival. I wasn't really living anywhere. I was surviving wherever I could.
Those tactics or those tools, those are the things that I find interesting and what I try to bring to our cast. Part of it's your story. The other part of the tools from the journey.
Right.
What did you pick up from this?
I feel like I learned a lot of quick thinking skills, definitely. I mean, I'm just trying to think of things that I actually use and are helpful today.
Well, you're a survivor, right?
Definitely.
So are you focused on prepping and surviving? How has this affected you?
Yes and no. For the majority of my young adult life, like early 20s, pretty much life was just surviving. It wasn't really living like I thought it was. I mean, in the same way that from my 20s to back to my teen years, where I thought I was, living in the moment.
Right.
But I was really just, I kind of was, but it wasn't really like a lifestyle. It was just me fucking off, really. And then those early 20s was just doing whatever I could to survive. I felt like I had to leave San Antonio. That's why I moved to Florida, which we'll get to. Mm-hmm. Because it was survival. It was, if I stayed in San Antonio, I did not believe that I was going to have enough strength in me to remain clean, to not either end up in jail overdosing or something worse.
Sure.
That was the only outcome I saw for myself staying in San Antonio. So, I was in the process of getting myself into like a 6-month inpatient rehab outside of San Antonio. And I was going to try to remain in Texas. It wasn't my original idea to just abandon home and try somewhere new and expect that to solve all my problems.
Sure.
But that's kind of what I ended up doing. And the expecting it to solve all my problems is obviously why that failed as well. But, just that whole move was about surviving the whole time. Before that move of me moving from place to place and doing thing to thing, it wasn't any type of living. It was just trying to survive. It was trying to come up with the money to not be sick for a whole day because I felt like I was going to die. So even all of the panhandling and, every other shitty thing I did, it wasn't because like, oh yeah, I'm going to go have fun and get fucked up. It was, not that it's a justification for, doing shitty things to get drugs, but it wasn't fun. I wasn't enjoying it. It felt like it was all I could do to survive. And that's a crazy thing about addiction.
It's a desperation, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a desperation. And it's that initial, when you wake up every morning, it is your first and only thought. Not, I have to pee. Not, I need some water. Not, oh, where am I? Where are the drugs? That's it. And I remember the first time getting clean for a decent amount of time where my first thought was coffee. And I recognized that right away. I was like, holy crap, my first thought wasn't drugs. Like, because it wasn't really something I was doing on purpose. It wasn't something that I feel like I could help. It was just, I wake up and my brain's like, hey, we feel like shit, drugs. And that was it. So then when I finally got out of that, I was like, oh my God, I thought coffee today. Like, that was my first thought. Yay. And when I started having less and less drug dreams, like, there's things along the way that just make you feel like you're making progress.
Sure.
And those definitely helped. As far as other tactics for survival that I feel like I use today, I feel like it's mostly just different ways I learned to survive.
Those tools build on each other, right? It becomes a repertoire or a toolbox.
Right.
And, yeah. So you're in the truck, you're dealing with all this stuff. You and your ex or you and your current are having some rough times. It's on again, off again. You get out of the truck. How? And I guess, have your parents been supportive through this time?
No, I was completely abandoned by my entire family.
And why?
Because I feel like much like my depression, they didn't know enough about it to have any idea of how to handle it.
Sure.
So when it came to my addiction, they just didn't want me around the other kids. I wasn't allowed in the house anymore. I wasn't allowed to sleep in the truck in front of the house anymore. Like, I was just, I feel like they get upset when I say it like that, like they just all completely abandoned me, but that's basically, what happened for while I was fucking up. They just didn't know anything else to do.
How do they describe it to you? Do they see it as the same as you? Or do they see it differently?
That's actually a good question. I should ask.
I'm good at what I do.
Yeah. I think I have a new conversation question topic for my mom.
Right on. A lot of that has to do with sometimes when you love someone, you have to let them go.
Right.
And if it comes back, it's meant to be.
Right, yeah.
But it's the same with parents. Sometimes tough love, you have to let them go. And hope and pray that they come back sooner than later.
Right.
Because it becomes toxic to the family.
Well, and I've seen the other side of that, too. I had a friend whose mother refused to give up on him. Even after all of the really crappy things he did, no matter how many times he lied to her. And, I mean, it finally just got to a point where she ended up having to give up on him. Like, it's not that I think...
And it probably killed her to do that.
Well,
right?
yeah. So it's not that I'm like, oh, my family just freaking gave up on me and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not... I don't think there's exactly anything right or wrong about what they did. I just don't think they had any idea of what to do.
Mm-hmm. The reason that I ask is that some people... So when I grew up, when I was 16, my mom said, because I was estranged my whole life from her, she said, I can never be your mother, but I can be your friend. She said, whatever gene that people have to become a parent or be a parent and care about their children the way they do, she didn't have that.
Wow.
So I always ask, because I find that gene is missing within 20, maybe 30% of our population, especially if you start to look at the home dynamics.
Yeah.
Do you have that gene in your family? Did you feel loved?
I know that they love me. And
Okay.
they always did.
But knowing and feeling it are two different things.
I could feel it too.
Okay.
I mean, anytime they would tell me, like, they're there for me or it was going to be okay, or like, so I got arrested once for stealing from Walmart, because no one's ever as good as they think they are. I remember going to my parents' house after I got out, and they both just hugged me and told me that they still loved me and that it was going to be okay. And I just started bawling. And, anytime they tell me they're proud of me for, at least getting out of all of those situations, I swell up.
There's a line in a song by Blue October that talks about making you compliment yourself. Yeah. I always felt like that fit you because you don't take compliments well.
Right.
You can tell you squirm.
Right, yeah. I'm like, yeah, thanks.
It's not a bad thing. It's just that as you work at your own self-discovery and who you are, learn to accept those compliments, but also make sure that you can tell the difference between fake and real.
Right.
I think the compliment part, when I'm dating somebody and they're supporting what I do, that to me is, I really appreciate and find substance in that. That's that partner aspect that I like.
Right.
So you pretty much are done with the truck, and you decide to do what?
Well, my first plan was to live in Sweeney, Texas, which is where my dad's parents live. So I went there, and it was right after Christmas. And
did the addiction follow you, or have you dealt with it at that point?
No, I went there to detox.
Okay.
And
did they know that you were coming to detox?
Yes.
Okay.
I was upfront with everyone about why I was going there, what I was doing. my grandmother.
That's great. They show a lot of love to do that.
Yeah. So, no one threw me an intervention or anything. I kind of did it myself. I was just so miserable, and
you recognized.
I hit a bottom, one of them. So I went there for Christmas, and then all of my immediate family left, and my amazing godsend of a grandmother, my Mimi, she took care of me. She let me sleep in her bed. She rubbed my back while I tried to sleep. I laid on the floor and rocking back and forth for like 3 or 4 days. It was just, it was withdrawals.
Sure. How'd you feel internally?
Really, when you're going through those first few days of physical withdrawals from opiates, you're not really focused on how you mentally feel or feel inside, because everything is screaming. You can't get past anything else, because what happens is what opiates do, they don't actually fix anything or help any pain itself where the pain is coming from. They just gum up and block those receptors. And your brain creates its own chemical that mediates those receptors. So you'll feel pain like you're supposed to, but it'll help so you're not in like overwhelming pain. You're not wide open to take every little feeling, like you'd be so sensitive. But when your brain is so used to having them blocked up and your brain doesn't have to create that chemical, it stops. So when you stop gumming it up, those receptors are wide open. So your skin is very sensitive, your emotions are sensitive, everything. Like, you can't sit still, you're fidgeting all the time. For me, I couldn't stop yawning. It was constant, and then my eyes are watering, my nose is draining, and it's draining in my throat, and then I feel like I want to throw up, and you're too hot, you're too cold, everything is just super sensitive for days. And then, so I was going through that, and I was finally I finally drank a whole glass of milk, and I ate an entire little TV dinner. And I was like, I ate the whole thing, yay! And my Mimi was so proud of me. Like, I'm fucking 21 years old, and I'm like, look, I finished my food! It's just starting all over again. So, but she was so supportive. And then, I was talking to my Aunt Trish, and she informed me of my parents' divorce, and apparently everyone in the family knew except for me. Because I've been off for years, living in a truck or here or there. I had my own...
They probably didn't want to put that on you and drive you further down.
Right. And they didn't, so I get that too. But so my aunt told me, and then I was like, let me call you back. I'm going to run inside real quick. And so I went and asked my Mimi, and I'll just never forget. I was like, can I ask you a question? I'm like sitting at the foot of her bed, and she's laying in her bed, and I got my blanket on me. I was like, did my parents seem okay when they were here? And just the look on her face, like she didn't know what to say. Because, they don't want to drag me any further down. And I finally ate a whole plate of food. Right. So,
last thing you want to,
So I was like, so it's true then. They're getting a divorce. And we were both just, you know how when you get really uncomfortable, your brain doesn't really know how to react, so there's nervous laughter. We started dying laughing, and we laid in the bed laughing for like 5 or 10 minutes, and we're both like, it's not funny. He's like, I don't know why I'm laughing. I'm not happy about it. I was like, I'm not either. Like, I don't know either. We're just laughing. But, it actually, the shock of it kind of helped bring me out of my own misery, because then my brain had something else bigger than me to focus on, which was like, finally something else that's not just how crappy I feel. And so then I started getting actually better. My plan was to live there. That wasn't going to work out due to issues with my cousin at the time. So then I was either going to go to a 6-month-long inpatient rehab just outside of San Antonio, or I was going to go to Florida. But to get into that rehab, I had to go to a detox center so they could take my blood, do this and that. There was like 3 objectives that I had to get taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And I could only get them taken care of at a detox center. Well, I had already detoxed. So, I go back to San Antonio, tell my dad to give me like an hour. Didn't tell him why. Like, I gotta say goodbye to a friend or whatever. My parents were pretty naive. I love them, but, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways. So then he picks me up. I'm pretty sure he was pissed because I was super fucked up. Because I had to have drugs in my system for when they drug test me at the detox. You can't go and say
Mm-hmm.
you're detoxing if there's nothing in your system.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. I get in. I'm there for the 5 days. I asked my parents if they'll help me get to Florida. So then I get out. And then I'm like, all right, I'm going to Florida. And I was in San Antonio for like 2 days. Didn't do any drugs. I was like determined, I'm gonna get out of here because nothing's gonna change.
Right.
So I got out of there. I got a Greyhound bus to. I got picked up in Orlando, but and then went back to just south of Daytona. Was where I ended up living for 2 years. So I went there, was with an old high school friend who I had not realized was also on drugs like me, but was also trying to get clean. So, you know, that's just set up for failure.
Yeah.
Didn't realize that at the time, moved there, was clean for a couple months, then me and him started fucking up for a couple months and doing. The big thing in Florida is not heroin, it's pain pills, but you can still shoot up a lot of those. So...
Using a needle seems to be attractive to you.
Yeah, that is definitely a problem with addiction. I mean, with needles, too. It's not...
It's its own beast, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's
Why
just
is
a
that?
whole new level. I don't know if it's because that everything is a more intense high, and then you've had that, so if you're gonna chase any, dragon, why wouldn't it be that one? Like,
But isn't that the way to kill you?
I mean, all drugs can kill you no matter how you do it. If you snort as much cocaine
Are you more
as
likely to die with a needle than you are doing it in other ways?
Probably, yeah.
What do you think the higher percentage would be? 5%?
I don't honestly know. I know a lot of statistics on drugs and mental health stuff, but I don't know that one.
I would say that it would be a lot higher. Just because,
Oh, well, yeah, I would assume it's way higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, have you learned to value your life yet?
Definitely. I no longer feel like, well, I'm gonna die, so fuck it, or just, I want to die. Now, my point in life is to get to a point where I can help other people. And I understand that I have to help myself, but that's always easier said than done.
Well, I'll tell you this. So,
I am human.
So most psychologists, most therapists are really fucked up people.
Hey, I'll fit right in.
Yeah, and they learn to help themselves, and so they learn tools like what I discuss on my show to help others by showing them those tools and examples. For you have been dealing with needles now for. Did you get over that? Are you still dealing with it?
It has popped up in my life again. I went 5 years without having any issue. And then...
What was the trigger for you?
Having access. It was just... It was
'Cause
having access,
needles
having
are hard to get, or what?
Well, no, it's not that they're hard to get, but it was after so long of not going out and getting them, why am I going to go out and buy some?
Sure.
And also just not having access to the drugs themselves, because a big part of my success of 5 years was I can see people who are fucked up from like a mile away, and then I run in the other direction, not towards them.
Right.
I'd stay away from all of those people. Like, if there's an occasional drug here or there, that's one thing.
You're
Fine.
so smart. You know what my grandmother used to say about that? if you roll around with dogs, you wake up with fleas.
Yeah.
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 It's all who you hang out with.
So, part of what happened, and I'm not blaming anyone else because it is all on me, and I take full responsibility for all of my actions, and I have fucked up recently. Like, I'm human. I'm not justifying it. It sucks, but, you know, it's not the end of hope for me.
It's a journey.
Yeah. There's gonna be speed bumps. So... someone in my life didn't understand how serious I was when I said I need to not know anyone who sells any drugs or does anything like that, because I need to not have those contacts. Because there's a good chance that, you know, I'd give in and want to take advantage of it.
Are you sure that he heard you?
I don't think he understood how serious I was. Or how big of an issue it is. Because, I mean, even people who have gone through addiction problems, if you haven't fallen into that category of needles, and whatever it is that makes it such a worse monster to fucking battle, you can't really explain it. I've yet to hear or find any way to convey it to other people.
Let me tell you an example.
Okay.
So let's say, hypothetically, I was somebody like that guy, right?
Okay.
The way that would work with me would be, look, I don't want you to associate with anybody that does that shit because I have an issue, nor have it around me. And if you can't do that, then I don't want to hang out, or I don't want to date you, or whatever. It becomes a very black and white, this is my line.
Right.
Sometimes if you're drinking or if you're whatever, you don't hear it for the way that you should have heard it.
Right.
So, anyways, for you, it's important not to hang out with people in circles that are going to support those habits.
Right.
Totally get that.
Yeah. And then, you know, there was a mishap and that I might have fucked up a few times.
It happens because you're on your own journey.
Right.
So, you ended up moving then to Florida, and your parents got divorced, you got clean for the first time. Nana held you. Mimi, sorry. Yeah. I love that. Okay. I love that. Very rare. Kind of like Granny. That was mine.
Mine was my granny on my mom's side.
Oh, mine too.
Yeah.
My dad's mom's grandma. So, yeah.
I had Granny and Mimi.
Nice. I like that. So, you decided you're getting clean. You got clean. Mm-hmm. You started dating someone. Where does life go from there?
So, I was in Florida. I moved out of the guy I had been friends with, who, like, we started messing around, you know, messing up. So I moved out of there, and I met someone else, and I lived with him for about 9 months. There's something about 9-month-long relationships in my life, I've noticed.
A cycle.
Yeah. Cycles. So we were good but not great, and I wasn't using, but I was drinking too much, but I was still, like, paying bills and working and
functional.
Yeah, it was, you know, functional alcoholic.
Would you say that would be transference?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I, you know, have always constantly battled on and off with drinking too much. I've gone almost a year, I think, without drinking at all. But then, you know, sometimes overdoing it, sometimes doing it in moderation.
You have to keep a balance.
Right, yeah. Balance is key.
And
I sometimes struggle with that.
Yeah, you like to do extremes.
Yeah, sometimes. It's, yeah. So then, we didn't end up working out, and then, I met it was a friend of mine that I worked with, and it was her dad. She was 17 or 18 at the time. I was 22 going on 23, and her dad was like 17 when she was born. So he was
34.
Yeah. No, that can't be right. She must have been older than 18 or 19, maybe.
All right, so he's close to 40.
He was 38 when he died.
He passed.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think I was 20.
What's his first name?
Michael.
Okay.
So, we obviously had really strong feelings for each other, but we both just kept not saying anything about it for the longest time because we were like, yeah, that's wrong. You can't do that. Like, he's like, that's my daughter's friend. And I was like, that's my friend's dad.
Right.
I'm not trying to be that person.
Right.
So we kept, fighting it and fighting it. I tried to date somebody else, and then when I was in Texas, he slept with Michael's daughter, my friend's. Then when I came back, I was like, I know I said we weren't super serious or monogamous, but I'm kind of done. Yeah. So then I was living with them, and then me and Michael were just spending more and more time together. And it just kind of started happening, and then we were really excited to be dating. We liked a lot of the same things. We clicked really well. I was upfront and honest about all of my past, my drug use.
Was he healthy for you? Or was he healthy, period?
I think he was decently healthy when he was not with me. I don't think we were healthy for each other. I came to learn that he was really codependent.
Okay.
And I was kind of abusive with that power that it kind of gave me. Because I knew I could get away with whatever I wanted, so I kind of did.
Isn't it kind of turning the tables on what you went through before?
Right.
So part of that's a release and a get back and a payback just from outside looking in.
Right.
It might have helped you deal with some of the things that you had packed away as baggage.
Right. So we were really happy for quite a while. And then...
Can you validate that, or am I way off, just so our listeners don't think I'm full of shit?
Oh, no, yeah. That, like, being in the reverse situation of being able to have some control due to my past, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I had said way earlier, was, like, I don't think it was so much a vindictive thing, but it was definitely like a feeling of power. And
Sure.
As a woman, sometimes that's really hard to come by, and especially with all of the shit that I had already been through with,
absolutely.
Larry and Crazy Chris, and having absolutely no power. I feel like that's still something I struggle with.
Anyone that's listening can totally identify with that.
Yeah. So, I definitely don't think it was healthy, and definitely not by the end. He ended up using with me, and So you got back into drugs. Right.
How did that become into the picture again?
I had found somebody who had it and had a connection, and it was just an occasional thing. I wasn't using every day. It was like 2-3 times a month. So this is what happened here. It was an occasional use, and I put myself in rehab for the second time. Before it was an everyday thing, because I know how this goes. Okay. Eventually, it'll progress.
Sure.
So no, I wasn't okay with it. And I put myself in a rehab, and it would have been through the holidays. And
so you're beating yourself up while you're doing this internally.
Right.
How long did you do that before you went to rehab?
Like 2-3 months.
That's great.
So, I did that. And then I ended up leaving rehab early. They're the ones that pointed out to me how codependent Michael was. Because I didn't see it before they pointed it out. But once they pointed it out, it was all I could see. So that really didn't help our relationship.
What kind of things did they note that our listeners might be able to tackle on if this is happening in their own lives?
what had happened that pointed it out to them was that he was calling the rehab a lot, trying to get to talk to me and stuff. And he didn't really want me to go to rehab. I mean, everyone was fighting me on it. Everyone was telling me, you don't use that much. You're not that bad off. Like, you don't need to go to rehab. Like, you could do this on your own. I was like, I don't trust myself. I want to do this before it becomes a serious problem. So,
right.
With everyone arguing with me, and then him, I mean, they knew that he wasn't happy about me going in there, or he wasn't, like, super supportive of it. Because he would rather...
Is it because he didn't think you had a problem, or because it was a control thing?
I think it was a combination of both.
Okay.
I think it was, he didn't understand how big of a problem it was, and...
Sure. To you.
Right. How scared I was of it
Sure.
ending up back with us living in a frickin' truck.
Right.
With somebody else. I'm not living in a truck again. Right.
Yeah.
And with him calling a lot, and there was a situation with, I played it to get out of there early because the nurses had pissed me off. Like, I really liked that rehab. I had a good time there, actually, for a rehab.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I sang a cappella in front of like 60 people. There were really good people in there.
All right, now I have to ask, what's a rehab like? Because I think of it institutionalized, linoleum floor, brick wall, painted, very sterile.
I mean, yeah, but this was also in Florida.
Right.
So we could go outside and smoke. And
Okay.
it's nice outside. It's
Right.
never cold like this.
Right.
So, and they had so many different programs. There was like music classes you could take. Like you could pick different classes you wanted to take. And there were only so many groups that you had to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And they had really interesting classes and stuff. Like we went, there was one class about lyrics and how we listen to songs, but sometimes not always the lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we listened to the song. She would hand us the paper and have us read the lyrics and then play us the song. And the one that sticks out to me still is called I Gotta Get High. And the words are like, I gotta get high all the time to keep from missing you. And stuff like that. And then it's like drinking in the bathtub, eating Twinkies, sleeping in the bathtub, finding daddies at the playground, like, you know. And I had never heard it before that. And I was like, go figure, rehab would teach me this song. You know, right? Like the irony. So, and then we had, you know, there were there were just good counselors in there. There were like 3 different paths of counseling you could take, where one was religious, one was psychological, and I don't remember what the other one was, but it was like they had something for everyone, and they had people from all over the U.S. go to this rehab. Like, I met a bunch of people from Ohio, and this chick's from New York, and this dude's from here and there, and I mean, it was just everyone from different walks of life that had similar problems.
Diversity.
Yeah.
It shows that it's not just your clique. It's
right. There was one guy, though, that was trying to get out, and I played the system and Michael against each other, so that way I could get out.
How?
Because one of the nurses, I went to the bathroom after I ate, and she came and knocked on the door to make sure that I wasn't throwing up. And told me that, and I was like,
sure.
That was always like a nerve to hit with me, was if people called me bulimic, or because before any drug problems, I never had an eating disorder.
You just have good genes.
But I had a really fast metabolism.
Yeah.
Faster than it is now.
I've seen you plug it away, and it amazes me.
Right. So, and I'm not knocking anyone or anything with, you know, anyone who's had an eating disorder. I'm just saying that I had plenty of other issues. That was just one that I managed to skip.
Mm-hmm.
And it would really strike a nerve with me when people would accuse me of it, because it wasn't my problem. I'm like, there's plenty of other things you could say about me. That's like the one that's so not true.
Right.
But so anyways, that had pissed me off, and it was about to be Thanksgiving, and I really didn't want to still be in there, and Michael was super unhappy, and so I told them that I was planning on leaving with some other guy who wanted to get out of there, And I knew that they would tell Michael that, and that he would drive down there. So he drove down there, and then I was like, okay, bye guys. And then I left. And I mean, that was not the way to handle that either. I should have stayed in there. Maybe I could have gotten more out of it, because what ended up happening was I still went back to using. And it got worse, just like I said it would. And
right. Are you numbing yourself at this point? Or is it chasing the feeling that it gives you when you're high? There's a lot of stuff I could see you wanting to numb.
It was probably that, just there being so much that I never properly dealt with.
Trying to get affection where you can, and trying to numb yourself when you can. So that it's still a balance, even though it's an unhealthy balance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that never ends well. It just gives you more, it gave me more trauma. So, it got to the point where we're both using now. He lost his job. His dad moved out of the house. We have this house to ourselves. And, I mean, when he 2 or 3 times made the joke about, well, we can always live in the truck, ha ha ha, I was like, no.
Yeah, that's the wrong button to push.
That's not funny. I'm not living in a frickin' truck again. So,
it's like trigger for PTSD.
Right. So, I had met a guy who lived in Wisconsin. And...
On vacation? Why was he down there?
He was on vacation. He went to go see the Daytona 500.
Okay.
And, he came back down to Florida just to visit every now and then. And so then I came up to Wisconsin for a week to visit, and he was offering to pay to move me up here. And I was thinking about it, and I was on the fence, and things weren't going good with Michael. We were using way more than we should have been. Well, which was none at all, obviously, but it was already getting out of hand.
Right.
And my thought was that if I was out of the picture, he would have to get clean and get himself back together. Because I was the one with all the connections.
Mm-hmm.
He did tell me that if I left him, he would kill himself, but I had already heard so much of that from Crazy Chris, and he never did it. He went on to procreate, that, there was no way he was actually going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
With all of my time of being suicidal, and then dealing with someone else threatening me with their own suicide,
mm-hmm.
I didn't take it seriously enough. So I left for the airport to catch my flight to Milwaukee, and probably about 5 minutes after I left, he hung himself in the garage. I missed my flight out of Daytona.
Because you found out, or just due to circumstance?
Just due to circumstance, because we were fighting right before I left, and that ran me late, and I missed my flight by 10 minutes, and I waited a few hours, did more drugs, and went back to the house, where they were pulling his body out of the garage in a body bag. And then his daughter was standing there, crying and giving me the most evil look ever.
How old was she?
She was 20, 21.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in the back of a cop car. I was hyperventilating. The cop asked me questions. I freaked out. Couldn't believe he was actually dead. I had the original guy that I moved down there with, that I had known since middle school, pick me up, even though we weren't even talking at the time. I just didn't really have anyone else. I was like, Michael just killed himself. They knew each other. Come pick me up. Please, for the love of God. So he came and he picked me up. And then I got a hotel in Daytona by the airport, so I could just get to the airport the next day. And it was just a long, miserable miserable time. Because, I've gotten better at not blaming myself for it now, but at the immediate time, of course, I thought it's my fault. And
Right.
it didn't help that I had his daughter calling me constantly, telling me that it's my fault and
Right.
how could I do this and that. So then the next day, I flew up to Milwaukee. I was up here for a week, feeling like absolute crap. And then my dad was getting married at the end of that month. This was in May of 2015. So I had the guy that I met up here fly me back down to Texas early, where I had the guy who I used to live in a truck with pick me up from the airport, and we could go get drugs. And then I stayed in San Antonio for about 2 months doing a ridiculous, the most amount of drugs I've ever done in my life within that 2-month period. Just, how am I alive? So, then, after I stopped feeling sorry for myself in the shittiest $40 roach motels that I could find in town for like 2 months and going to my dad's wedding and all of that, finally, the guy from Wisconsin came back down there, took me to my grandparents' house one more time, my Mimi's house, before we flew out of Houston up to Milwaukee. And then I was up here, and then I spent a week dying on the floor, not able to eat. It was worse than the first time. It was just, Netflix was my only savior.
Who's the guy that flew you up?
His name is Joe.
Okay.
We're still friends. He lives in Fond du Lac. I actually saw him last week. He's a good person. He was just trying to help me. He had no idea the shit show he was getting himself into when he met me. Yeah. He found out pretty quick.
Yeah.
But, so, after that point, I remained clean for 5 years by using, survival tactics that I learned along the way. And
Like what?
just having to, I couldn't stay there with him because Michael had just killed himself, and...
Joe?
Yeah,
Okay.
with Joe. It was just driving me mentally nuts.
Sure.
So then I found a way to move out to the country. It was quiet, lots of space. There were animals to take care of, horses, dogs, a cat.
To rent? You found a place to rent? Or
No, I met a guy who wanted me to come stay at the house rent-free if I took care of it while he did construction work in Milwaukee.
Okay.
So it was like, I clean, I cook food, I take care of the animals.
Just a roommate?
It started out platonic, and then he was kind of pushing for it to be more, and then he got forceful with me, and then I left the next day after that.
Gotcha. He didn't rape you, but he tried, or...
Right. He was an alcoholic, too, which was fitting for me at the time, because I was replacing drugs. I was still very raw. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was still very raw. But I couldn't hurt myself or anyone else, really. I was like, for the most part, till the horse ran me over, but that's another story.
Right.
Yeah, it was just an open space to drink and clean and cook and be away from the world. There was no TV there. It was all movies, watching DVDs. I had my phone, so I wasn't, completely shut off from the world, but...
You definitely were out of your element.
Yeah, but it felt nice to be somewhere completely different.
Right.
Right. That lasted 3-4 months until, he got really shitty. And then I moved to Sheboygan for a short period of time. And then I moved in with Robert. And we were together for 2 years. And it was
So a lot of guys to guy to guy to guy kind of survival tactic.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So a lot of the last few years of this most current on and off relationship I've been in, it's been a lot of time like the first time ever of me living on my own, having my own space. Of course, until I let my brother move up here, and then that was a nightmare. And I helped out Howard for a while, and that was a nightmare. But anyways, besides trying to help out other people from out of state, I've lived on my own for like 3 years until this year. And I really enjoyed that, and I think it was really good for me. It was a good way for me to learn even more about myself. Apparently I learned that I'm a slob if I don't keep up after myself, because, do I hate dishes. But outside of that, like, I learned that I was good alone, you know? Just me and my dog. I mean, if I didn't have him, that might have been a different story, but...
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah, my dog's got my back.
Yeah. So, you have developed a spot here in Sheboygan, but it's been turmoil lately. You have this survival tactic that you've not been able to break yet, except recently. But now you're going to be moving to Indiana with another guy, but not with him, but to pursue it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back to having my own apartment. I think I was dumb forever leaving my last apartment and moving in with a roommate. I should have just stayed on my own. I would have been better off. But yeah, I mean, I am going there in pursuit of this relationship, and I hope and wish for the best, because I think there's a lot of potential. But ultimately, it is going to be me in my own apartment with my dog, paying my own bills, getting my life back in order. Because in the last, I think, 4 or 5 months, I have lost track of, everything of where my life was going. This year has been a rough one for everyone, with COVID and this past election and just all of the chaos and rioting and like all of the, just everything. It's been so much this last year.
We take the best of things with us, and so I hope to take the best of my experiences with me and vice versa with you.
Right.
And I hope that for you, self-awareness, breaking patterns.
Right. I still have plenty to work on.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm aware.
But
life is a process.
Here's a secret. It never ends.
Right.
I've appreciated this time talking with you. I think that it's been insightful for a lot of us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's been a journey for self-discovery. It's been things that you've had to get over. It's definitely left its scars and its marks on you. But for all of that said, you are one of the most beautiful people I know.
Thank you.
And I just wish the best for you. So,
and same for you.
I'm fortunate to have you as a cheerleader from afar. And, I just appreciate you. So with that said, thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thank you.
You have yourself a great day. Okay?
Yeah, you too. Thanks.